Thanks.
Okay. Right. Hello and welcome back, everybody. My name is Mary Ellen, and I'm part of the steering group for DPAC, and I'll be chairing the second half of this meeting today. The meeting is about Stop and Scrap Universal Credit and where now for the campaign. Since the COVID-19 outbreak, millions more people have applied for universal credit and have learned some of the realities of dealing with the Department for Work and Pensions. At the same time, the government have brought in temporary measures that campaigners have been pushing for years, such as increasing the weekly amount that people get on and temporarily stopping job centre appointments and sanctions. The DWP staff have been moved over to work on universal credit, and the customer service is now better than ever. People on legacy benefits have not had any increases to their weekly amounts, even though disabled people have had big increases to their expenditures due to COVID-19. Disabled campaigners were also alarmed by comments from Labour's new Shadow Secretary of State for Work and Pensions, Jonathan Reynolds, suggesting that those who work should be entitled to more from the social security system than those who don't. The fundamental problems with universal credit, highlighted in 2018 by the United Nations Rapporteur on Extreme Poverty, Philip Alston, have not changed, and DPAC continues to demand that UC is stopped and scrapped. So this meeting is about getting us to look at how DPAC is and campaigners are going to campaign looking forwards from now. So bear with me, just scroll down the page. So the second half of the meeting will be focused on how we campaign against universal credit, and we will hear from DPAC activists about how we have campaigned at both national and local levels, and about their ideas for how we take the campaigning forwards. We're going to ask we're asking people to please send in any questions and contributions on the comments section wherever you're watching the meeting, whether that's on YouTube or on Facebook. And we'll pick up on those questions and contributions at the end. So without further ado, I'll introduce Mark Dunk, who has been an active member of DPAC since 2012 and who also sits on the Disabled Workers Committee for the London and Eastern region of Unite. Over to you, Mark.
Okay, thanks for that, Mary Ellen. I just want to start by apologising to the interpreters. I'm quite a little less well prepared than I was for last week's book launch. And the reason for that is that I am facing universal credit as a real prospect in the near future. I'm facing losing my job for the second time this year after losing it for a couple of weeks and being placed on the government's furlough scheme. I'm now involved in a redundancy process and likely to face the same fate as many of those whose livelihoods have been supported by the furlough scheme in the last few months during the coronavirus. And it's going to be a big battle, a hard battle to fight back against the ugly nature of universal credit. But I do think it's one that we can win. And like Dave did earlier, I want to pay tribute really to someone who's played a role in some of what we've done to take the fight this far. Sean McGovern. He's left a huge hole in our movement. It was absolutely heartbreaking to say goodbye to our friend and comrade this morning. And I wish Dave all the best of luck in carrying forward that torch in the trade union movement. It's a hard act to follow, Sean. He's certainly left a big hole in the London and Eastern Disabled Workers Committee, and I hope that we can carry on the work that Sean's done and carry on that example. It was a privilege to put forward at last year's Disabled Workers Conference the union's motion that year on a national independent living service, something that would be absolutely a massive step forward if we can see the devastation that's been wreaked on social care and support. But Dave earlier mentioned another motion that Sean was involved with that was a little before that, and that was putting forward the position of stop and scrap, something that Deepak's campaigned with for years, really, ever since universal credit came forward as something that was going to be introduced. And if you look at where we are now, in some ways, it's hard to believe that there was ever a debate around the fact that we needed to get rid of universal credit and how awful it is. But a few years back, we weren't in the position we're in now. The rollout hadn't reached into every corner of the UK. And there were arguments about, oh, we should pause and fix, or we should just look at what we can do to change it. But it's essentially a good thing. I think the speaker in the first half, I think it was Charlotte, said that this is absolutely, the government is trying to undermine the basis of the welfare state with universal credit. And I don't think it's an exaggeration, really, to say that. Universal credit has taken like the chink in the armour that was opened up, really, when the system moved away from what it was under the Department for Social Security, where it was a system based on the fact that people should be able to have a roof above their head, should be able to eat, have the basics of life. When that was broken with, when we started to get the very first elements of conditionality, was I think when I first claimed benefits, it was job seekers allowance. You had to write down 3 jobs that you'd look for every fortnight. Absolutely unrecognisable from the brutal levels of conditionality, and also the sanctions that go along with them under the universal credit system. So you can see how entrenched this idea has become, that is about divide and rule and the brutality of that. But despite that, despite those differing positions, really, we were able to carry forward this argument and win that position across large sections of the movement, culminating with some of the stuff that Dave talked about in the first half. But how we got there was a process of patience, diligence, and hard work. We sat down, we wrote motions, we wrote leaflets talking about all of the things that everyone can reel off now, things about the rate clause, things about how unfair sanctions were, and putting this really in the context of the government trying to scapegoat people who've been left without work and disabled people for the cuts that they were making, trying to find people to blame. Oh, it's all those people who want money for nothing. It's those refugees. It's all these people that they were trying to cast aspersions on to cover their own backs, while they absolutely went hell for leather, making cuts not just to direct welfare provision, but also to our NHS, our schools, and everything else. But with that patient work, we were able to carry that motion through with the aid not just of Deepak campaigners, but bringing together socialist trade unionists around the country, putting that through at the bottom levels in branches of trade unions and pushing those up the scale to take that debate forward. And it was brilliant the other year. Ellen Morrison, who's behind the scenes at this meeting, deserves credit, because she presented brilliantly the motion at My Union Unites policy conference when the position to stop and scrap was won. And I think that shows, really, in terms of the fight that we've got coming, the lesson that we can learn from this is that actually, if you're patient, if you do the hard work, that you can pull people together and organise to really shift things and to make a difference. That working together with a level of organisation and unity, clear goals, that's what we're going to need to do to have a voice. Mary Ellen spoke about the stuff that Jonathan Reynolds is coming out with, and I think it's absolutely clear that in the fight that we've got coming, that we can't now rely on the Labour front bench to be our voice. We are going to have to build a campaign where we can say what we want about what we want. and not rely on others to do it for us. And I think Mark Harrison's going to speak about this in a lot more detail, but really I think what we need to do is take that energy and that diligence and that need to bring people together, the possibility that we've now got, because as people have said, millions of people have now been thrown onto universal credit. Many more are going to come, people in my situation whose jobs have been supported, whose income's been supported by the furlough scheme, who are going to find themselves having to claim universal credit in the coming months. And actually the brutality is coming back as well. Sanctions back at the end of this month, and certainly if they push forward with this change to the 1 metre rule, it won't be long before they're trying to get people back in the job centres so they can hand those sanctions out, again with the aim of distracting us as they try and make workers and working class people, whether they work or not, pay the cost of them propping up profits. The reason they've been handing out all this money to the rich isn't to keep the likes of us in food. They've proven they don't care about that. They've driven many people to food banks over the years. Really, it's been about supporting the continued making of profits. But they're going to try and cut their cloth down on that front, and they're going to try and make us pay. But we don't have to pay. Those people that are going to get a taste of it, people that are going to have to rely on a system that will give even less and treat you even worse than the system I had to rely on in the last recession when I was unemployed for 14 months. People are going to be angry, people are going to follow a lead if we give one. So I think what we need to do, I said last week at Ellen's book launch, that we need to, when they reopen those job centres, we need to go down there and we need to build an army. I did some quick back of the fag packet figures the other day. There's about 16 job centres in South London. If we get the levels of unemployment that we're seeing in places like Canada and the US, once the furlough scheme's gone, there's going to be about 30,000 people roughly claiming universal credit for each of those job centres. That's a big section of the population that we can reach out to and try and get into our movement. So we want to pull people together, do this in an organised way, because when we stand together, they can't break us. So if people want to get involved with that, we should have the ambition, really, I think, of having a campaign group, something that's an umbrella, which I think Mark Harrison again is going to talk a bit more about, that we can stand together with different groups of trade unions, DPAC groups, non-disabled claimants, that we can come together under it to fight back against universal credit. And we should aim to have one of those groups for every job centre in the country, with hundreds of members in it, taking that fight to the government's door, knocking down on Boris Johnson and Coffey, the disgraceful person who's in charge of the DWP now, to tell them that we're not going to have universal credit, that we're not going to have sanctions, and that we're going to fight them every last bit of the way on that. And if people want to get involved with that, if you're in a DPAC group and you think, I want to set up that umbrella in our area, if you're not in DPAC but you want to get involved with this, please do get in touch with us. If you email info@dpac.uk.net, we're going to be working along with the unions, along with the existing umbrella campaigns, along with existing campaign groups in little areas that have actually been setting an example, going out and doing the hard work outside the job centres to try and spread this and build a national campaign that can punch above its weight and hopefully knock universal credit into touch once and for all.
Thank you so much, Mark. That was really enlightening and helpful. It was good to hear you talk about being ambitious about this and forming a campaign with a united front of disabled people, non-disabled people, the unions, etc. And yeah, that was absolutely brilliant and spot on. Thank you. And now I'm going to introduce you to Jennifer Jones. Oh, is it Mark Harrison? I'm confused. Who have I got on here? I've got Jennifer Jones next, but I've got you on the screen, Mark Harrison. Now I'm confused. So is it you going next? Mark?
Okay.
I presume so, because you're on screen. Ellen, help. Is that okay?
Yeah, Mark, if you want to go,
yeah.
that's great.
Yeah, okay. So this is Mark Harrison from Norfolk Against Universal Credit. Mark also plays a leading role in Norfolk DPAC and the Reclaiming Our Futures Alliance, which is a network of grassroots disabled people's organisations and campaigns across England. So over to you, Mark, and thank you.
Thank you, Mary Ellen. I'm going to speak about what we've done in Norfolk and how we've built a grassroots campaign from the bottom up. And it was a united campaign between DPAC Norfolk, which was formed in the early 2010s against the government austerity programme, and the local disabled people's organisation, which was Norfolk Coalition of Disabled People, which became Equal Lives. And we fought against the so-called welfare reforms from 2012. And we organised protests outside our local work capability assessment centre that was then run by Atos. And every month we would, for 2 or 2.5 hours on a Friday, picket the work capability assessment centre, partly because it was inaccessible to disabled people. If you can believe that, like the DWP had an outsourced disability assessment centre that disabled people couldn't get into, but also to scrap the work capability assessments. And it was that campaign that led the way to also, when they scrapped disability living allowance and introduced PIP, we did the same thing, because the PIP assessment centres were completely inaccessible as well. And we fought a campaign long and hard over the next few years against those hated assessments. But then they introduced universal credit, and that's when our campaign really had to step up. They did a pilot in Great Yarmouth on the east coast of Norfolk, and it was devastating. Food bank use doubled, debt doubled, and people were just devastated by it. So when they announced they were going to roll it out in Norwich, DPAC Norfolk got together with Unite Community, and there was a public meeting. And at that time, it was decided that we were stronger together. So we organised a joint campaign, a united campaign, to scrap universal credit in Norfolk. And we named it Norfolk Against Universal Credit. And we were planning a march and a rally around the city centre. And in the meantime, they brought the date forward for the rollout. So we called an impromptu demonstration outside the job centre on the day the rollout began. And we advertised it on Facebook and Twitter, on social media, and over 50 people turned up. And this was enormous. And we did press releases, and the TV and the radio came, and the local press. And it made a huge impact, which meant that when we had our demonstration and rally in the centre of town on a Saturday, we had over 120 people marching around the city centre with banners to stop and scrap universal credit. And this was right at the beginning. So I think it's really important that, if we are, the speakers already have talked about the dire situation that universal credit has imposed, not just on disabled people, but on all claimants. And it's, it couldn't be clearer. It is the 21st century workhouse, except they aren't putting people in big buildings on the edge of town. It's imprisoning people in their own homes, in the community, with not enough money to live on, in debt, and reliant on food banks. So it's urgent that we step up the campaign. And that's why DPAC and NAUC and others have set up Scrap Universal Credit Alliance. And this is meant to be an umbrella body for all local campaigns, wherever they are around the country, to really coordinate and step up our campaigns. And, you know, I think we need a campaign on a similar level to the poll tax movement, where a grassroots movement in every town, in every city, in every area of the country had a movement to scrap the poll tax. And it was a long campaign, but eventually it was hugely successful and the poll tax was scrapped, and that led the way to getting rid of Thatcher. And that's what's facing us with universal credit. With COVID-19, you know, huge sections of the workforce are being thrown into unemployment, thrown onto the mercy of the DWP and universal credit. And this is going to create a huge schism. So we need to plan for this. We need to step up our activities, unite DPAC local groups with DPAC national groups, with Unite Community, and all those other groups that want to stop and scrap universal credit. So if you look at the Scrap Universal Credit Alliance website, we have social media, Facebook and Twitter, but we also have a website, and on there there's a guide to setting up a local campaign. It's not very long, it's very simple, it's bullet points, but it's based on the experience in Norfolk. But that's what I think is needed to turn all the fine words that we've had tonight, the very powerful words from all the speakers, into action, because words are cheap. Unless we organise to get rid of this hated, miserable attack on our rights, and the thing that's forcing people into food poverty, into early death and suicide, we aren't going to do justice to our movement. So the first action I would propose tonight is that we've heard that they're going to reintroduce conditionality and sanctions on the 1st of July. So I'm calling for all local DPAC groups, all local campaigners in every town and city across the country to organise a protest at the job centre, in the centre of town, at the town hall, at City Hall on the 1st of July against the reintroduction of sanctions and conditionality. Okay, so and that in that way, and then use that as a way of launching a local group to scrap universal credit. It's very simple. You get together with people who are like-minded, you organise a room, you get together, or you organise a Zoom meeting, and you set it up, and we will support you. So through SUCA, through DPAC, through local DPAC groups, we will support you to do that. And that's my call to arms. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mark. That was really enlightening. I particularly was interested in the you're mentioning about the Yarmouth trial for universal credit, and if only people had actually paid a heed to DPAC at the time, maybe we wouldn't have all these problems that we're experiencing now. But it's never too late, and let's unite and deal with this. So on that note, I'm going to invite Jennifer Jones to join us next. Are you there, Jennifer?
Hello, good evening.
Ah, there you are. And yeah, just to tell you a bit about Jennifer. Jennifer is chair of the Sheffield DPAC, and she'll be talking about last year's successful Dump Metro DWP Lies campaign that was spearheaded by Sheffield DPAC. Welcome. Thank you, Jennifer.
Hi, everybody. I'm not chair, I'm co-founder of DPAC in Sheffield, but thank you very much for having us this evening. So hopefully you can see a bit of our lovely DPAC Sheffield banner. So I'm going to talk about the Dump Metro DWP Lies campaign, and I'm actually quite pleased I've gone on after Mark Harrison with his call to arms and guide to setting up a campaign. So what we're going to talk about is we're going to talk about the timeline of the campaign, from start to finish, how we fought and won. And hopefully in the comments, somebody will be sharing, one of the admins will be sharing a link to Disabled People Against Cuts DPAC Sheffield page, where there is a pinned note at the top of the page, which has a long number of articles, PDF files and screen grabs that relate to what I'm going to talk about, because there's no way we can fit it all into the 5 minutes, but it's also a super useful tool when thinking about building a grassroots campaign. So May Day rally, May the 4th, 2019, I was handed an envelope from a complete stranger who recognised me from being involved in Disabled People Against Cuts. And they said to me, somebody wants to tell you something, but they need to stay anonymous. There was a lot of people around, and it was a sunny day and very vibrant, and I sort of nodded, oh, thank you, and popped it in my handbag. It's only when I opened it the next morning that I saw that what I had in fact been given was a leaked internal Department of Work and Pensions memo. So I got in touch with my friend Aditya Chakrabarti at The Guardian, and we had a little chat. The 14th of May, so just 10 days later, a huge double-page column in The Guardian, The Great Universal Credit Deception. Now, if I can manage to call it up on my photos, I want to read you just a very small amount of what is a 1.5-page document. So this is what it said from the Department of Work and Pensions, Neil Cooling and co. The features won't look or feel like DWP or Universal Credit. You won't see our branding, and this is deliberate. We want to grab the reader's attention and make them wonder, who has done this Universal Credit Uncovered investigation? The stories will feature over the first week and 9 subsequent weeks. Blah, 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 blah. We know the rest. So basically, the Department of Work and Pensions paid the Metro newspaper a large sum of money, namely just under £250,000 of public money, to improve the reputation of Universal Credit by putting advertorials for Universal Credit in the Metro newspaper that were actually disguised as newspaper articles. So we knew then that we had to organise fast. It was the 22nd of May when the first advert came out. So just over a week after Aditya Chakrabarti's article in The Guardian that exposed the whole thing, we received a tweet from someone who works on the trains somewhere in the country saying, those ads are in the Metro today that you've been talking about. So that's my first point. This was a trade unionist reaching out to DPAC because they had seen we'd been talking a lot about these upcoming Metro advertorials from the DWP. My son went to school. I went straight down to the train station, staged a one-woman protest with this flag, which I'll briefly describe is a large fabric stop and scrap Universal Credit logo. Placed that over the Metro newsstand and was live streaming myself on the Facebook page for DPAC Sheffield, whilst also rapidly tweeting and emailing, WhatsApping everyone that we could think of, and then carrying on that communication through our vast online network of incredible disabled activists and allies. So by the end of that day, there were photos coming into our Twitter and Facebook from all around the country of individual activists swiping small numbers of the Metro newspapers in a reusable carrier bag, maybe with 20 or 30 and things like that. Now, we knew that this was a good way to respond to this campaign because the Metro is a free newspaper after all. You can't stop people taking all of the Metros. There's no law that stops anybody doing that. So we, over the next 7 days or so, got organised, talking to DPAC National Steering Group and our DPAC groups around the country, as well as allies and supporters in the name of the RMT Union, the Bakers Food and Allied Workers Union, our various local TUCs. Sheffield TUC were incredibly supportive, as well as Sheffield Stop and Scrap Universal Credit Campaign. People arranged to do different things, but the main thing that people did was dumping the metro, and the hashtag was born, hashtag dump Metro DWP lies, which if you look that up on Twitter, it's just so much fun. Now, we absolutely did our best to remove hundreds and thousands of copies by hand, by taking even suitcases full of the newspaper, bringing it home in a taxi if we couldn't drive. My dad is one of many helpers who did many trips to the local recycling plant, and I know a lot of people did around the country, because we did underpin the message that we're not to put things straight in the bin. We need to be environmentally conscious throughout this campaign, with it all being paper-based, and we were. Now, we did sort of think, this is good and it's growing, but we need to make a real impact. So we had a chat amongst our networks nationally, and we put a Just Giving fundraiser together to hire a van to drive around major towns and cities to take the Metro newspapers from the stands. And I do have to give a shout out to Lorraine, the lovely van, who was driven by somebody you probably all know, but whose name I'll not disclose at the moment. Lorraine, what a superstar, and our activists swiped thousands and thousands of Metro newspapers in this transit van that we'd hired as a national movement. And I'll tell you more about what happens to those newspapers in a moment. Now, the DWP's plan hugely backfired, because not only were they not improving the reputation of Universal Credit, but we were getting contacted by people who'd never been involved in anything political before. People who travel and commute a lot for work were getting in touch with photos saying, look, I've just dumped 20 copies of the Metro today, whether the ads were in that day or not. And it did seem that the pattern was the ads were coming out each Wednesday. So we concentrated on holding our actions each Wednesday. So every week we had video clips and photos streaming in. The campaign won Campaign of the Week in the Morning Star newspaper. There was a lot of articles by Disability News Service, The Socialist Worker, and also the Mirror and the Guardian, to name but a few. And I've got to mention at this point that, as well as planning and coordinating these types of direct actions, there was other stuff going on too. We made a short subtitled video which explained what the campaign was and why we were doing it. And that's again in the appendix of links that's on our Deepak Sheffield page. There was also some incredible investigative journalism done by Alex Tiffin at Respect is Vital on Twitter, in the form of a Freedom of Information request to find out how much the government had spent of our money on these articles in the Metro newspaper. And I must add, the articles appeared in the Daily Mail website and the Metro website as well. We've never found out the cost of that, but the paper version was just under £250,000. We were blessed with all our massive network of contacts to have someone actually design a campaign logo for us, which is a white circle with the Metro logo, the hashtag, a skull and crossbones, and it says, "Poison, do not read." So during the night in Sheffield, supporters were plastering the areas where there are Metro newspaper stands with these stickers, and also a stencil started appearing around the town centre. I don't know how, but it looked very much like this, which is a large stencil version of that hashtag, dump Metro DWP lies, about A2 size, A3 size. So, and again, we were still getting people daily messaging us, dumping the Metro with pride. Now, I know we will be wondering what did happen to the thousands and thousands of copies that got swiped with the transit van. Well, an amazing team of people, which was mainly activists in Bromley and Croydon, but some other areas in London as well. Deepak, Kilburn Unemployed Workers Union, and Bromley and Croydon Unite Community, as well as others, boxed up the newspapers, the Metros with the adverts in, and physically took them with a letter addressed to Amber Rudd to the DWP headquarters. Now, I have to say, this was an absolutely heroic direct action in part of this campaign. They did risk arrest doing this, and I know that it was a stressful experience for some of the people involved, because for several minutes, the guards actually did put the security lock on the doors. So a huge thank you and so much solidarity to all of you who took part in that specific part of the campaign, because that was the risky bit. But luckily, unfortunately, everybody did get out fine. Now, simultaneously, due to this, incessant campaigning by all of us, a consortium of 80 charities lodged complaints to the advertising standards, who told the government to pull the newspaper advertising campaign. It was paused. July the 4th, Disabled People Against Cuts Sheffield, we then got an email from the Metro themselves saying, oh, hi, we've written a story about how claimants shouldn't be labelled scroungers. Do you want to share it on your socials? So we emailed back with links to all of the newspaper articles that talked about DPAC's action against their newspaper and the DWP, and asked them if they wanted to share it on their socials. Funnily enough, we didn't get a reply. Now, after 7 weeks of campaigning, the government, they've either given up printing them altogether, or it was because the ASA told them to pull the ads, but they pulled the ads. So it was supposed to be 10 weeks, but we managed to shorten it to 7, which was a huge success. Then on the 5th of November, a somewhat appropriate date, I think you might agree, the ASA announced that they had banned the ads. And this was widely reported, including on the TV news this time, surprisingly the BBC. It was on Channel 4 News. Again, there's a link to that in the appendix of links on our page. And it was on Newsnight, where Emily Maitlis really tore into it, one of the MPs responsible for being involved in this. And I sat and raised the glass and laughed. I raised the glass to every single one of you who have in any way been supported in that campaign, whether it was a retweet, whether it was physically turning up, it all matters. Just to get on to finish, Chair, this year the government investigated themselves with regard to this campaign, and they found that they hadn't done anything wrong, which surprised absolutely nobody. Quietly reported, because journalists obviously are all very furious with them for faking being journalists and paying to put it in the Metro newspaper with public money. So I'll end on this. It's too late, Amber Rudd, too late, Neil Cooling. We absolutely thrashed you, and we'll do it again. And if there's one thing I learned from this, is that even if you've got to do it quickly, you've got to have a plan, a little bit of coordination, and I love it when a plan comes together.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. That was brilliant.
Thanks, everyone.
Okay. Yeah, it was a fantastic campaign, and seen across the country, and so many people joined in, as you said, who have never been part of anything like it before. So you led the way and showed people that we can do this together. So let's do it together. That brings me to some comments that have come up. Where are we? Sorry, excuse me having to scroll. Okay. That is, bear with me 1 second, sorry. Tony Cox.
Let me know if you want to jump in, Mary Ellen.
Yeah, I'm struggling to find Tony Cox's thing. Can I just pick one?
Yeah.
Is that okay?
Let me know if you want me to do it. Otherwise, go ahead. Great.
Okay.
I can come in with the question.
This is from Julian, who describes himself as a black deaf guy from London who supports DPAC and Black Lives Matter. He says, within DPAC, we must be empowered to very strongly, passionately challenge the attacks represented by universal credit before too many more impoverished people die, commit suicide, go hungry because they have no money for food and their kitchen cupboards are empty, become penniless, can't pay their gas, electricity or heating bills, get thrown out from their homes because they are unaffordable to pay, and the cruel and barbarous policies of the Tory government are being felt across Britain. And Eileen Short from the campaign group Homes for All links tenants and housing campaigns and trade unions so we can organize together to win and change, to stop evictions, rent rises and demolitions, fill empty homes and get 100,000 new council homes a year. Everyone has a right to an accessible, good and secure home, and we can beat government when we organise determinedly. So those were the comments. And Colin Hampton from Derbyshire Unemployed Workers Centres encourages everyone to get involved with Unite Communities Day of Action on Wednesday, 15th July, which will be called Universal Discredit Social Security. Their 3 demands are: make the £20 increase the standard allowance permanent, make the £20 increase available to those in receipt of legacy benefits, people that are not getting it currently, end the 5-week wait for payment of campaigners, get in touch with Unite. They will provide materials as well as a guidance pack for lobbying MPs. People and branches will be asked to promote the people's personal experiences in film clips for social media, as well as campaign photographs and actions. There will be a hashtag for the day. So I don't know if I've got time for this one question. Have I got time to ask it, Ellen?
Yes, please do.
Okay. This is a question from Tony Cox about how do we resist attempts by the DWP to bring folk back into face-to-face meetings before it is safe to do so. This is a question for Mark Dunk, please, if you can answer that.
Okay, thanks, Mary Ellen. I think it's absolutely right that we should try and resist attempts to get people back before it's safe. I mean, certainly if the government is demanding that people who've been told to shield for all this time have suddenly got to turn up their job centre and expose themselves to a real risk of contracting coronavirus, we have to make sure that we are supporting those people if they refuse to do so. I think we should use our media contacts to do that, but also if they're doing it, we should have a list of demands ready to go, and we should call a day of action with protests outside job centres like Mark Harrison was talking about earlier. We can have demands for screens, sanitizer, social distancing, risk assessments of every job centre to make sure that they're only calling in a number of people each day that it's possible for people to see. We should absolutely say that if they can't put enough people through the job centres safely, then they shouldn't put anyone through it, because it would be absolutely unfair for some people to be under more risk of sanctions and under more scrutiny because of their lack of ability to provide it safely. So I think we've got to absolutely take that head on if they try and do it.
There we. So I'm about to hand over to Paula Peters from DPAC's National Steering Group, who is also chair of Bromley and Croydon Unite Community, to close the meeting. But first, I'd like to thank all the speakers from today, as well as our BSL interpreters who've done an amazing job, as always. And I'd like to remind people of the dates of our next online meetings, which are 29th of June, which is Universal Basic Income Solution or Illusion. 6th July, Reinvigorating the Social Model of Disability. And 13th July, International Solidarity Meeting with disabled campaigners from around the world. And I think that's it. So I'll just hand over to Paula, who's going to close the meeting for us. Thank you so much, Paula.
That's okay. Good evening, everybody. And thank you to Mary Ellen, brilliant sharing. And thank you to everyone who's spoken previously. Wow, how do I follow all of that? To be honest, now more than ever is the time to unite everyone together and fight back against universal credit. And, you know, there is a lot of despondency out there, but what we have seen with great campaigns led by Sheffield DPAC with the Metro, what we've seen with the building of Suka and, you know, up in Norfolk, that we can actually unite communities together and fight back the conscious cruelty that is universal credit. And we've managed migration due to start on the 7th of July, and 7 million people are going to be transferred over from legacy benefits to universal credit. It's really important that we build local campaign groups, local campaigns against universal credit in all of our areas. And I'm picking up with what Mark Harrison said about that. We're going to be building a local SUCA in South East London to cover Bromley, Lewisham and Greenwich. And so we're asking you to join that campaign and at mail@dpac.uk.net. It's really important that we are outside the job centres, speaking to claimants, knowing that they've got the support out there. And I want to pick up with Charlotte and Gail, you know, the work they've been doing, you know, helping claimants know what their rights are, knowing that they're not alone, knowing that there's support out there. That work is so important. Knowing what the right information is, it is massively, massively important. But what I said last week is, you know, the library campaigns are so vital to universal credit. You know, with a lot of libraries being shut, with volunteers running libraries and everything, it's really important that we join the fight for our library campaigns. We've had a lot of success here down in Bromley, because with the welfare rights advice shops closing, law centres closing, you know, people are turning to the libraries for welfare rights advice, but also to fill out the horrendous application for universal credit online. And you know, a fifth of disabled people have no access to a computer and don't know how to use one. And this is digital by default universal credit. So we really do need to highlight the campaigns around that. But it is so vitally important that we unite and fight together. But also, I think, you know, we pay tribute to Sean McGovern today, and we must continue the great work that he was so passionately involved in. And I want to pay tribute to all my fellow DPAC campaigners who work tirelessly hard to work right across different spectrums to bring about change. And it's important that we reach out across the divides, across trade unions, across all the different campaigns, unite and fight together, because it is building alliances by uniting together, by fighting together, do we bring about the change we want to see. And you know, we do not want to go back to how things used to be, because we should not be paying for a pandemic crisis and, you know, the cuts that are to come. You know, it's so important that we continue the fight to campaign and also get other people involved. You can do that via Unite Community, you can do that via DPAC, your local housing campaign, but whatever, I ask you, I urge you, I implore you, join a campaign, let's get active and let's fight back, because it's the only way that we'll win. So I want to say thank you to all the great speakers that we've had. I want to thank the chairs for chairing, and see you at the next meeting. And that's goodbye from me.